Hey guys, what's up and welcome to another episode of TheGoodCastShow. So this time we have a repeat guest, somebody who really sparked a lot of debate in his last interview promoting his book, How Malaysia Missed 7 Chances at Nation Building. The book is still available. We'll be sharing the links in the description of this video. So if you haven't got it, please get it. If you love economics, love Malaysia, love the topic of nation building, that's a book for you. But today we'll just focus more, a micro focus, being inspired from the previous interview where we talked about MADANI, we talked about slogans like One Malaysia, a Vision 2020, Keluarga Malaysia, etc. So today we want to focus on MADANI and other slogans as well, and just a brief get my guest view on certain current happenings. So before that, let's go into what exactly the word MADANI means. It's an acronym made up of 6 core values, namely sustainability, prosperity, innovation, respect, trust, and compassion. Now, since 2023, this slogan, the question is, has it been adhered to in the moves and plans of the government? My guest did question whether Vision 20, the failure or success, the failure of it was a result of whether or not the moves, the policies were always checked against the basic core tenets of that slogan. But so to answer the question is none other than the author, former CFO of Maybank, my favorite bank. Maybank, come on and take the hint, sponsor the podcast. Please welcome Dato Mohammed Hussein. Dato, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for coming back again, Dato. It was such a pleasure having you the last time. So the last time in our discussion, we talked about, very briefly, we talked about slogans. And of course, now we have a new slogan, MADANI. This slogan is basically meant to be the guiding light, the North Star, the face of the government of the day. But in Malaysia, unfortunately, we have a graveyard of slogans. Where do these slogans fall short? Is it in the implementation or is it just empty promises? What's the problem?
I have to give a corporate response to this kind of question.
Yes.
Because I never have any political or government experience. My experience is largely on the business corporate front. So when we talk about a slogan, is a vision. A vision in a corporate context, a vision is something that you formulate and would take maybe 5 to even 10 years that you break into milestones, maybe 3 or 5 years each. So the very first thing when you come up with a slogan is to socialize it first. To socialize it first with your own team. For example, when we in the corporate environment, if I recall, when we wanted to make Maybank, which was not always the biggest bank in the country. This is way back in the 80s. The biggest financial services the first bank, the largest bank in the country. We huddled together for about over the weekend, several weekends in Port Dickson. It was led by Ahmad Don then, the late Ahmad Don. He passed away recently. And we huddled together to create that. To come up with a vision of what we want to be, and to just to come up with a vision of what we want to be, and spend time to socialize what that vision means among the team, and to come up with specific plans as what that vision means to each member of the team, to each division run by each member of the team. So when you come up with a vision, it's very important to socialize that vision so that every member of the team understand what it means and commit to a series of actions yet to be formulated then that will be aligned to that theme. And so that period alone would take several months. And when you do that, you know that whatever vision you come up with, you have to get that vision shared with the rest of the bank, the branches and the people. And that's what we call the cascading period. Cascading period. What happened in that cascading period, every one of us in the management team was allocated a few branches of the region to visit. So I was given the responsibility for a few states, which includes Sarawak. I remember taking a 5-hour boat ride, from Miri to Kapit, to cascade the vision. That process is important because you're going to have the shared understanding of belief. Now, in the context of the government, MADANI, it has to go through the same process. that every member of the cabinet, every member of the cabinet has to understand what Madani means for each of them, and what it means. Well, first as a concept, what it means for each of them in their respective ministries, and later on share that concept with the executioners, the civil service, so that down the line, even at the counters, at the various states, towns, people know what the concept vision means. I think this is so. Madani has to be a very long-term plan, and it has to start first with that, with spending enough time to get buy-in from the
But
team.
let's assume that process has already taken place. Let's give the benefit of the doubt to the government saying that this process has taken place. I mean, we can never know for sure whether it has or not. But in your opinion, as a voter, as a Malaysian, what you read in the newspapers, in on the news portals, do you think that the Madani concept, its pillars, are being reflected upon when policies or initiatives are put forth by the government of the day?
No, that's why I think we need to go back to that question, first step, whether or not that first step was well done.
Okay.
Obviously, some of the policies that come out later on were clearly out of line with what Madani wanted to achieve. And I must stress what I said earlier, that to me, Madani, actually, I understand the concept better when I think of it in the original
Islamic system.
In the original book by PMX, Script, sustainability, right? C is care and compassion. R is respect for the individual. I is innovation.
Okay.
P is prosperity. T is trust. So it's easier to understand what it means. Whereas Madani, M Mampapan, where is the M coming from? So it's mixed up a bit. So this, to me, I wish at some point of time, Madani, because it's a good concept and requires a long time to be implemented, I wish at some point of time it becomes a national goal, so that it doesn't get associated with one mandate. This. If you look back, every incoming prime minister want to have his own his own vision. That's not good for implementation of Madani either. So at some point, it's good. It's okay to start with Madani or Script, but at some point, it got to be incorporated as a national thing, because otherwise, a new guy coming in will undo and do. So, but I hope this, we give him sufficient time to implement this, because
on that note, Dato, one popular opinion that defends the Prime Minister is that because he does not have the mandate of the people. Right? At this point, he's not like the Barisan Nasional before with their 2/3 or their simple majorities. He doesn't have. He's working in a coalition of convenience. Do you think that will impede the implementation of Madani? And to truly fulfill the potential of Madani, he must have the full mandate.
Now you can understand why in my second book, in my recent book, one of the chances that we missed, I mentioned, was that we dissolved the NOC too early. The NOC, as you know, the NOC is National Operation Council, where the country was under the absolute leadership of Tun Razak. Parliament was suspended. And I said we dissolved that too early, because to implement the recommendations of NOC required a strong government. You cannot do many of those reforms in Parliament. In fact, if I recall, on the very first day that Parliament reconvened, there was already a quarrel between the parties. So similarly, Madani requires strong measures. On sustainability, on respect, which is racial tolerance is a form of respect.
It is.
Is a embodiment of respect. Religious tolerance is about respect. Innovation is about
R&D.
education.
Yeah.
Education.
Innovation.
Education, because you got to innovate. To innovate, you got to impart to have the right skills and values. And there are many things in the way of implementing those. And without a strong mandate, you cannot. So you're right. Yes, but a unity government that do not buy into the concept will create problem. I think even yesterday the PMX was quoted as saying that many of the reforms required buy-in from the unity government. I mean, that's an acknowledgement that he
Couldn't get that buy-in.
He lacks that
Yeah.
mandate.
Now, I want to go into the M, which is, you mentioned, sustainability. Now, just for those watching, the M in Madani stands for comes from Kemampanan or sustainability, which highlights Malaysia's commitment to long-term development that balances economic growth with environmental stewardship and social stability. Now, of course, Madani is underneath Madani is midterm goals. They have short-term and medium-term goals. One of it is to rank Malaysia among the top 30 largest economies in the world. At present, we are 37. Is this an achievable target in the next 8 years?
Not without intervention, not with the same policies that we are implementing.
Where are we going wrong, do you feel, Dato?
As I mentioned in the last interview, we look strong in the eyes of the world because we present to them the average of our economy, the average income per capita and all these things, consumption. But like most things, the average is derived by calculating its component. The two basic components of economies are, of course, the Bumi economy, the Malay economy, and the non-Bumi economy. And the difference between these two economies is like putting one hand in boiling water, another hand in freezing water, and claiming that I'm very comfortable because the average of the two is comfort.
Yeah.
But
it's still funny.
But it is not sustainable.
Okay.
Because it's not sustainable, it affects other elements of Madani. It respects tolerance. How can you continue to have tolerance when there's so much gap?
Yeah.
It reflects prosperity.
But like what you said, Dato, the separate elements of Madani are interdependent. I think that's what you're leading to.
Yes, it is.
So should the policies enacted by government stop addressing issues from the racial point and be a blanket policies that will impact all communities? Because I've had guests from DAP recently and PKR who share the same thing. They say that PMX vision is for all Malaysians, which is what the Madani is. It's a balanced economy, prosperity for all communities. So shouldn't we go that route as opposed to focusing now instead of the Indian, Chinese, Malay communities, which then goes on to fuel the lack of tolerance and respect. So it sort of is its own enemy in a way. Instead of, so do away with all of that and we do policies for everyone. One policy for all. Shouldn't that be better?
But is ignoring the problems of the various races. I mean, the reality is you're right. I mean, it's better. But if we do that, we are ignoring the problem of the disparities. Because
Such as? I mean, what sort of problems are we ignoring? I'm just curious.
Okay. To answer the question, maybe I need to go back a bit to the NEP, when NEP was first implemented. If you remember, when NEP was first implemented, it was implemented on the recommendation of National Operation Council, Mageran, who concluded that the riots were due to the differing economic status of the Malays and the non-Malays, mostly the Chinese. And the percentages was, the Malays own only about 2%
1.5 at the time. Yeah.
The non-Malays and the British, which include the British at that point of time, was the rest. So we need to encourage the Malays to do more business, more business, be involved in more business, both at ownership level as well as participation. Now, one way of doing that was to form SEDCs, to act as the catalyst for this. And one of the very first projects of SEDCs was to was to build shop houses so that the Malays can do business. Okay, let's just take that example. So the project was to say, and there were 13 SDCs formed. So say, assume they were given 10 million each. So 130 million was spent. Mind you, this is in 1972, so it was easier to do that. A lot of money then.
Yeah, a lot of money.
So assuming that each SDC spent 10 million to do these shop houses and related foundering, kononnya for the bumi, but let's trace the money flow. You see, if you building a house requires first planning, right? Architect, okay. Now, even at the point of time, there were several architects, Malay architects. So, okay, maybe a portion of them is given to the Malay architect. Assume half, but that's only about fees altogether only about 7.5% of total construction cost. So there's about 3.7% that goes to the movie. But the rest of it, when you start building the structure, you need gravel, you need cement, you need concrete, you need steel, and you need excavators and lorries to carry them to the site. So who owned this supply chain? There was no bumi in that supply chain. So almost, I wouldn't mind. I would claim maybe as much as 80% was spent of the spending, which is to be the name of the bumi, goes to the non-bumi, not because of their fault, but because they are in the supply chain. And the bumi didn't get a share of that, not because of but because they were not in the supply chain. So and then when the finishing, typically a house, when they build a house, about 40% superstructure, then 30% on M&E and woodwork, concrete, and 20% labor, which at a point of time, the labor there's still a high component of Malay laborers. After that, it's all Indonesian and Bangladeshi. And of course, the finishing, the carpet, the furniture. So out of the 130 million spent as a program to help the Mumbis, the first spending of maybe 100 million went to the non-Mumbis and therefore widened the gap. So this so-called Bumi policy then, which create resentment among the non-Mumbis, in fact benefited the non-Mumbis more. So you have that problem. You say, oh, this is a program for the Bumi. And the non-Bumi get upset. Well, why are they? But they are actually the initial main beneficiary of NAP spending, simply because to spend, they are in the supply chain. Even housing, if you remember, you build a lot of township like Bangi and all the things which are bumi, but so you attract a lot of bumi middle class. But they have to buy, they have to spend. Where do they spend? If you go to the shop, to the commercial areas of even this Malay township, the Malay businesses were initially mostly just tempat makan and apa lagi, sundry shop maybe. The higher value, the electrical, the households, and even the offices are largely the bumi. So the additional spending power of the bumi actually benefited the non-bumis. But you create resentment.
But Dato, you are comparing what happened then when there was a need for all this NEP. NEP, I have no issue with NEP. I think it was a good example of how a government can actually uplift a community if they wanted to. They created a very a good middle income group among the Malays and all that, which was fantastic. Even now, we have agencies that are already operating that will continuously care for the well-being of the Malay community, whether in form of entrepreneurship, education. These institutions are already there. At this point, Dato, considering your career, I don't think you can still say that those circumstances exist today. They don't. The Malays have already been uplifted. They already can compete. So why not create policies for everyone and let the free market take reign?
I hope you are right, and I would love to be proven wrong in that sense. But in terms of ownership, you're right. Yes, the Malays through institutions like PNB, the various state agencies, owned a bigger corporate stake.
Yes, even now
than they had before, but they do not have strong presence still in the supply chain. All you got to do is just go to visit any suburb, any township. Let's just look at the shops operating. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I had a podcast in Taman Tun, so I went early and took a walk along this shop house that starts with midpoint on one end and a clinic on the other. I counted there only about 6 or 7 out of 30 shops there. That's on the that's only on the first floor, not on the second and third. So, and they're not in the kind of business that generate a multiplier. But ownership, you're right. Things have much improved. Our corporate, when we share the ownership, corporate ownership now has moved to, by according to statistics, about 20%. But not in terms of operating of businesses.
Could that be the side effect of the NEP itself? Because just to go back to the Madani framework, I was discussing just now, in terms of the medium-term objectives, there are 3 that I'd like to focus here. Number 1 is to rank Malaysia among the top 30 largest economies in the world. Number 2, to rank Malaysia among the 12 countries in the world in the Global Competitiveness Index. And number 3, to rank Malaysia among the top 25 countries in the world in the Human Development Index. Because after a while, when things are sort of conferred to you, without you having to try for it or work for it, there's sense of not laziness, but sense of apathy, indifferentness sets in. And the idea here is that if we were to practice more policies that are blanket policies across race, it will force these people that you mentioned, these businesses, to become more competitive, to sort of cajole them out of their slumber and say, look, I have to compete. Because we are moving into a world that's now globalized. Competition comes from everywhere. I've seen agencies IT agencies in Malaysia which are run purely by foreigners. Maybe the ownership is local, but run by foreigners. So this will force us, not just Malays, Indians, Chinese, all of us, to be more, to instill a sense of industry in us. Shouldn't that be the focus, Dato?
Yes. And in fact, on the very first point about you remember you said that Madani is into all these elements,
which is
interconnected, right?
Interconnected, interdependent.
The goal to be the 30th economy. What are the dependencies? The dependency is first prosperity. If you want to be, if you come from 37 to 30, in other words, you want to develop prosperity. Prosperity of all races has to be, otherwise it is not sustainable and it cannot reach. So, and all races meaning everybody working at the same level of industry. The level no lacking lah basically. Or firing on all cylinders. Everyone, the Malay have to work on all cylinders.
Correct, exactly.
So you have to work on that basis. Education, innovation. Because the industry, the growth in the industry in the future is technology based. Technology based, and what is dependent on knowledge? What knowledge? STEM. Where does you learn STEM? School. So you have to bring back the honor of teaching in the school. The honor of being a teacher, so that you attract the best to be teachers. Give them proper recognition in terms of their terms of service, whether they are posted in the rural area or in town area. But most important, attract the best. Good salary. That's a dependency. And of course, tolerance, which is respect. Tolerance, because tolerance, when there is no tolerance, it creates leakages. Everything do not work as well because there's there's no synergy among races.
Correct, but can that exist when there are racially biased policies?
It cannot exist. But this is the irony. We seem to have racially biased policies which is to help, but in the process, because the recipients of the policies do not take advantage of this as well, so benefits are transferred to the others. For the country, it's okay. Because whether it's transferred, whether it's the prosperity is transferred to Malay or the non-Malay, for the country, it's okay. The country, the cake gets bigger, but the share of the cake actually gets smaller because when you're starting, you're starting just like a league table. You're starting your bottom four. maybe bottom 10 in the context of EPL, and you are at the top. If you want to get anywhere to the top, you have to work harder at the top even.
Exactly.
Not relax, but then you widen the gap. And so the effort to get the Malays to respond to this, I have to be frank in talking about this, because otherwise the message doesn't get passed.
Please.
Okay. You see, okay, take the biggest expenditure in any budget is, of course, development expenditure, infrastructure, and it's all, the source of these are all government. Government give out the contracts. Because of our race-based policies, the preferred recipients, preferences will be given to the movie companies. But many of these movie companies that are given the contract are not in the business, so they cannot implement it. So they're connected, but they cannot implement it. So they farm it out to the order. So.
But if we are just one last point on this, I think let's move on to the other.
I have to complete the point.
Oh, sorry, please.
They farm out that point. So the recipient, who invariably are the number Bs, perform it, get their share of the work, and create the multiplier process to the supply chain, which are mostly again non-Burmese. The Burmese that just subcon a huge portion of it. Only does its part, if at all. Otherwise, they just sell it outright. No multiplier effect is created from that.
Can nation building coexist with affirmative action?
Could, but you have to do it differently. We cannot keep doing the same thing that we've been doing for the past 50 years and expect different results. So affirmative action has to be in a different form. The affirmative action is to take affirmative action to make sure that the Burmese respond to the opportunities. Work for it. Not affirmative in terms of giving opportunities and not bothering whether those opportunities are worked upon or simply passed on. But affirmative in the sense that the Burmese are trained and coerced into acquiring the skills so that they can, when given opportunities, take it on. Affirmative in that sense, which is not what is happening now. But having said that, I must say again, I must acknowledge that many segments of the Burmese actually respond to that. But these tend to be the professionals. The biggest NAP to me is education. And within education, the biggest beneficiaries are those who are engaged in the professional architects, accountants, engineers. Because when they are they go into these fields because they were passionate about it. And they practice the skill. So when they practice the skill, they develop competency. When they develop competency, they become sustainable. Kemampanan, sustainability. Sustainability is not just about environment, but about businesses based on competency. So NEP can exist. If it NEP can only be can exist. Sorry, this nation building can exist with affirmative action, but a different kind of affirmative action aimed at enhancing the competency of the Burmese Putras. Not simply giving opportunity and not bothering whether or not they're.
But Tun M had a very interesting statement that he made, I think in 2010, I can't remember which year. But basically what he said was that although the government would create policies and activities or initiatives for the poor, he sort of was hinting that the poor need to help themselves as well. They need to focus on finding different ways of making money and things like that. But he did say the government will create policies for them, but that they had to work harder. That was, I think, his whole thesis of what he was saying. So is this a case that what you're trying to say, Dato, is that could it be that perhaps why the NEP has not been able to benefit almost a majority portion of the Malay community is simply because of a human lacking, whereby basically best represented by the fact that you can bring the horse to the trough, but you can't force it to drink. Not everyone is going to grab an opportunity like you or like other professionals among the community. So my question would be then, why spend more effort on these people who are not willing to grab the opportunities that they have been given?
Sometimes it's not willing. Sometimes it's the opportunity do not reach them. And the opportunities are given to member trusts, yes. What they are supposed to do, what was expected of them is to take on those opportunities,
Correct.
work on them, and in the process create opportunities for the poor. But that did not happen. We have spent almost maybe 1 trillion, if not more, on development expenditures over the 1992 to 1972 to 1992, the
20
NEP,
years,
the
okay.
20-year plan. We must have spent trillions almost on development expenditures. And many of these are given to either Bumitra companies or even JSC. But if they work upon properly, they should develop a supply chain of Bumiputra as well. You are in control. The contract is yours. You can choose who to buy from. Encourage Malays down the poor. Either give them job opportunities as construction, so that they can improve themselves. So it's not the fault of the poor alone. That I tell you, many of them are hardworking. I take Grab every now and then, and I always have conversation with Grab drivers. Many of them wish they had better opportunities, but opportunities don't come their way. Many of them are in fact doing second jobs because they're not enough to live by.
But based on what you're saying, if the main con is a Bumi, if the supply chain are Bumi, where does the non-Bumi go?
Oh, not entirely. There's no way that will happen because now it's zero base. Well, maybe 2%, 3%, depending on some industry. You have to split. This is why I prefer a concept of not so much Bumi and non-Bumi, substantive partnership. Substantive partnership meaning the focus for all, inclusivity, but do not encourage purely Bumi companies, but try to encourage Bumi and non-Bumi partnerships, but substantive partnership. So it become more inclusive. The reason is simple. If you have only a Bumi, if you're a purely Bumi company, you tend to think only of Bumi customers. You don't have connection to tap the non-Bumi customers. So by having proper partnership with non-Bumi, you tap a wider market. So there's always the non-Bumi supply chain is here to stay. There's no way that you can undo it. There's no intention to undo it, but just to get a better, give Bumi a better share of that. Let me put it another way. I hope our economy is trying to make the economy more Malaysia.
I agree. Yeah, I'm all for that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Malaysia, I know was a controversial term before, but it was purely from a political point of view. But there's so many elements of Malaysia. The economy. Right now, we are not a Malaysia economy because of the wide share, low share of the Bumi. We are not a Malaysia economy from the non-Bumi perspective, in the sense that there are no opportunities for the non-Bumi in certain areas, including education, scholarship. So there are many aspects of Malaysia, but in the context of what we're talking about, making Malaysia, we need to imagine making Malaysia the 30th economy. We need implementing that, strive for a more Malaysian Malaysia in terms of our economy and focusing on the supply chain.
Okay. Just again, on that topic, as I said earlier, there have been a lot. I think what Tun Razak did with NEP, with all the programs was fantastic. Some of the programs, for example, like Felda. Felda is a fantastic idea. I always tell, in my circles, the Indians should...
Fantastic idea and well executed.
Even till today?
See, it was well executed then because civil servants of that time were a different breed. They were driven by nation building.
Yeah.
It was carried to it was a very successful program. But the maximum under Felda that you can own was only 10 acres for each settler. There was a period in the 80s, I think, when the government was opening up a lot of, they call it kawasan sudah kerja, but logging areas which were fell down, which they wanted to convert to open up for oil palm. And there was, most states were allocating about lots of 5,000 acres for this. So there was, to me, they should have also gave opportunities to those successful settler settlers to upgrade themselves from 10 acre to bigger acreage. Then there was to me, that was a wealth enrichment opportunity that we missed. Maybe my book should be called The Eight Missed Chances, and I would have included
one more. One more.
Oil palm, because oil palm if they had done that, in fact, I was in a bank then, I noticed that most of the application for this 5,000 acres came from non-Bumi. So I actually asked one of my business managers, why are there no application from Bumis? I never got to know why.
On another thing is, of course, economic growth. We talk about prosperity. That's also one of the main tenets of the Madani framework. And one of the things that actually definitely contribute to economic growth is stable inflation, which basically equates to low, predictable and controlled price increases over time. However, in recent times, we've seen a lot of shocks given to the Malaysian business ecosystem. We saw it with the revision of the diesel subsidies, the upcoming petrol subsidy revisions, and now the expansion of the SST and all that. Are these revisions that are happening across the board, particularly when it comes to business, do you think this is something that will help the Madani framework come to fruition, or will it be another impeding factor, you think?
Well, you're right. I mean, for many years we enjoyed low inflation, so there was fortunate for us. Unfortunately, our income also didn't grow much.
Yes,
the government unfortunately also employed a low cost policy for many sectors, which resulted in the brain drain. But on the latest shocks, a lot of these shocks were foreign induced. I mean, first the Ukraine war.
Okay.
I mean, the Ukraine war was the first shock. It affected the supply chain and everything. Then, more recently, Trump's
tariff.
The SST. Actually, I was always critical of the government doing away with GST. But GST, by its very structure, is the most fairest of all. What they should have done was to just, at the point of time, 2018, not to remove it completely and change it to the SST, but to simply reduce even to 1%, but keep the system in place. Because we spend billions in putting that.
And then as you go, you can incrementally increase the percentages.
Exactly. But that wouldn't, in fact, that would be a depression in terms of prices because we reduce. But instead we put in the SST, which affects everyone. Whereas GST was a fairer form of tax. So,
do you think the government should sort of hold off on certain things, stagger it, especially with the whole Trump tariff issue still not finalized, and we but we have just come out of a pandemic, and all the wars and all that. Do you think that we should sort of tone down on the shocks that we're giving? Or do you think that the government has no choice?
I think we should. You're right. I think we should. I mean, even when GST was introduced, there were many small businesses, mom and pop and small businesses that actually closed down because they thought it was too much bother. Now the similar pressure come from one is this e-invoicing. E-invoicing is good for the tax revenue, but in the process it may affect many businesses. If it is transitionary, okay, they can live with it. But considering it could be hold off for a little bit longer.
But considering our low tax collections when it comes to personal tax, sometimes I feel like the government has to do this because somehow they need to increase their tax revenue. Although by comparison, by percentage, we are not too bad, but only about 1 million plus Malaysians contribute to tax. So do you think this may be the best way for them to increase the tax collection, the whole tax revenue?
Well, it is ultimately an inevitable way, but there's a faster, easier way to increase not so much tax revenue, but available tax revenue. I mean, efficiently used tax revenue. Stop the leakages.
Where are the leakages, Dato?
Contract, inflated spending, all these corruption leakages, and no accountability for it. Every year we read in the AG's report, every year, I think for the past 10 over years, every year we read about the leakages, but there's no accountability in it in terms of disciplinary action on the responsible ministry, for example. In the energy in the private sector is that such thing, the perpetrator would either be disciplined, or at least barred from promotion for a few years. That will pass a message. But if we can release, that leakages, and the last AG report is mentioned a humongous figure, which I wouldn't want to mention it here because I may be wrong, but that is better than increasing revenue.
Okay, fair enough.
Corruption and leakages.
Stop the leakages.
Yeah.
Now, in our last interview, you brought up a very good point. I think a lot of you said you brought up the point about how there was no technology transfer in our car industry. For example, you talked about Proton and the ties we had with Mitsubishi, where it was almost like a rebadge kind of thing. I think this was something everybody was thinking about, but nobody said. But you said it, and we all agreed. Now, among the factors that impact our global competitiveness index rating is an innovative ecosystem. So this can be broken down into business dynamism and innovation capability, which is R&D, patents, and all that. So I want to go back to the local car industry. When we first set it up, Tun Mahathir did implement excise duties, which is to protect our local industry from imported cars. Do you think that now these protective barriers should be done away, and let's allow the free market to dictate who survives and who fails, and as a way to sort of boost the local dynamism of these companies in Malaysia?
Two major impacts of that car industry. First, our policy then was import substitution. At the same time, Hyundai went into and same as Proton, about the same time, went into passenger car industry. They were in the commercial car industry earlier, but they went into commercial car industry at about the same time. But they went for export market. The difference in the enforced discipline on the operator is that if you go for the import substitution, you tax the imports, and therefore your production cost becomes the cheapest. Not because you produce at the cheapest, but because you make the others more expensive. I remember when I first bought my first car, it was, those days when we buy our first car, we don't buy a brand new car. We progress from motorcycle to we progress from taking a minibus those days to buying a motorcycle. And buying a motorcycle is only 1 month's pay. Maybe you can buy this Honda Cup for about 600-700, which is 1 month's pay. And after 3 years, you upgrade yourself to not a new car, to a used car. My first used car was only about 3,500. It was a Volkswagen when a new Volkswagen was about 5,006, if I remember, which is.
The new Volkswagen was 5,006.
In 1972, yes. No, that's only 1 year's pay. But if you look at America, you look at UK, that is a relationship between a car price and your salary. You can afford to buy a motorcycle for just 1 month's pay. You can afford to buy a car for just 6 months' pay. A government servant at the time would own about 800 car, about 5 months' pay. you can buy a house for just 2 years' pay. And therefore, your debt burden is not
so
so
low.
high.
Yeah.
But now, because your wage hasn't gone up, so stick to the car example.
Yeah.
When you impose that stamp duty, the cheapest car, Proton, moved from I can't remember the price, but to about maybe 12,000 or something. Already, you feel poor because you have to pay more. Yeah? And if Proton goes that, the other cars also similarly priced upwards. So that is the first impact on Malay on our affordability, purchasing power, that we artificially jack up the price of the car in order to sell this car. So that was important. The second part, or what I said, the fact that the very policy that we do not want to go for the export market but go import substitution. So there was comfort, a sense of comfort that never mind. We don't have to produce so cheaply because it's going to be cheaper than others anyway. So there was no urgency to really apply to acquire technology so that we can produce cheaper.
Correct.
There was no urgency.
But now, Dato, these excise duties, do you think they should still remain? Considering that Proton has been bought over by Geely and Produa is doing well, but do you think that without these duties, it will lead to a better performance by these companies? Or, I mean, are these companies limiting the progress, the whole evolution of these companies?
Unfortunately, it has become such a huge source of tax now.
We have to.
If you take it out, where do you replace it from? So
Okay, fair enough.
it's wishful thinking. It's wishful thinking.
Now, again, we were talking about R&D, and that's also part of the MADANI framework, the innovation. So the thing about R&D is that our government spends only 1% of our GDP in R&D. This has been almost consistent. So yes, we plan to increase it to 3.5% in 2030, if I'm not mistaken, or 2035 or something like that. Our private sector contributions to R&D has also dropped by 56% from 2016 to 2020. Leading economies spend about 2 to 4% of their GDP on R&D. When I mean leading economies, I mean like Japan, China. So it's in the hundreds of billions that they spend on R&D every year. Is this lackluster approach to R&D in Malaysia fueled by our inclination to be reactive instead of proactive, perhaps caused by the mollycoddling that's been happening for decades?
Malaysian, one of our trait is always this shortcut approach. We want to fast track everything, and we prefer to acquire technology than to develop our own. But the reality is the industry, the channel is moving so fast. If you don't invest in it, you will left. You're left.
Or is
but
it?
Of course, the other school of thought is that if you invest in it, unless you can come up with the best, you're going to be left behind anyway. So that's why let's do just what is necessary to keep up, and then
Just make that.
no need to be a leader of the pack, and do it the cheaper way.
Okay, now another aspect of the Madani framework is among their midterm goals is that number one is to rank Malaysia among the top 12 countries in the world in the global competitiveness index, as I said before. But this interesting one was to increase the female labor force participation rate to 60%. What is your view on this exclusive focus on female participation in labor? And I have nothing against the female gender, but my belief is always meritocracy, the best of the best must always rise to the top, regardless of your race or gender. Do you think that this exclusive focus on 60% labor force being female is contradictory to the entire Madani framework again?
Where is the contradiction?
To inclusiveness, to have a balanced development across communities. Why the sole focus on women?
Actually, it hasn't. This focus on women, in a way, has some justification. One is their share of the market is low, so inclusivity actually means giving them more opportunity. Two, again, I may receive brickbat for saying this. My own experience is, I find my female workers more driven. More,
I have to agree. I have to agree.
I remember when I started corporate banking, I started in Maybank, and this is 1984, 81, I think. I hired a team of half women, half ladies, and the ladies outperformed them guys. And the top three of them, whom I call, my friends call them MH Charlie's Angels. So, they were. I mean, they went up to places. They were right now. They're holding no less than they reached what? No less than the C-suite. Is that?
So they are better.
Even if you go on the merits, many of them deserve those opportunities.
Correct. Yeah, I have the same
I know
experiences.
you say you agree anyway.
I do, because when
I must apologize to
the men.
Male guys, but they have their own strength as well. So I have to say that they have their
more for
strength
hard
as well.
labor. No, but again, I mean, you brought up the point about, we were talking about EPF and all these tax collections and all that. We're seeing now in Malaysia, in terms of our economy, we're seeing that, as I mentioned just now, the number of people with EPF that can last after their retirement is dwindling. The threshold is about 300,000 now, and I think people in their 30s, apparently more than 90% haven't even met the 240,000 benchmark earlier. We are seeing that Malaysia is going towards age nation in 2030, which will mean that there'll be a birth of the sandwich generation, which means further financial, burdens on this generation. When we look at the main tenets of Madani, which is prosperity, economic growth, and all that, it's more pertinent now that it takes shape to save our country as we head towards 2030 and post that. In your opinion, is there enough being done in terms of policy making that would curtail this problem in terms of post-retirement well-being, in the savings of the country and all that?
I think post-retirement is now a global problem thanks to COVID. The COVID has destroyed the savings of many working, many worldwide, not just in our country. And you see the evidence of it. People, this is the coming crisis for the country, that people are retiring without enough savings.
Yeah, and
so it's necessary to increase the working, the retirement age, give them the opportunity to build up. And plus, 60 is a little too young to retire, actually. Not now, because of better health and better longevity. When I did my first retirement plan, I was 35 then. It was in 1985. I assumed that I will no longer be around by the age of 75. My father died at the age of 72. We clearly are not saving enough for our retirement, and especially the Malays. Because the Malay, when I tell you my own case, when I build up my retirement fund, I assume I only 3,500 a month, because in those days retirement means balik kampung. I go back to Kelantan where I can live, and no more retirement. No more retirement financial obligation. But several things along the way, I realized I didn't save. I did not save for my children's education. I assumed, like all Burmese, that scholarship or loan will be on the way. When the government done away with that, I had to scurry around to make up for it. And children's wedding. I didn't save for that. See, Malay wedding is not like Chinese wedding. A Chinese wedding, you go to a Chinese wedding, you look at the place, this place, they charge about 100 a plate. So you pay 200, you basically pay for your own meal.
Yeah.
A Malay wedding, not now, but until a few years ago,
they didn't have that culture?
They give Queen Anne, they give iron, they give all sorts of gifts. A place,
that doesn't
vacuum
pay
cleaner, that doesn't pay back for the wedding. So, but now I think they're changing. Medical, I remember when I was doing some research on insurance industry, I bumped into somebody from Europe who said 80% of our medical expenses are incurred in the last 2 years of our life. So we may feel that we're not spending enough on it. We're not spending, so we don't have to save too much for it. But when it happened,
it happens.
But when it happened, we whack up your order. your medical benefit. And those people who think that they're working with company and get retirement medical benefit are kidding themselves, because when they retire, those medical benefit go off. And if they try to get medical insurance at that age, the premium will kill them. So we are not planning enough our medical insurance.
Should the government interfere in this in terms of pumping money back into EPF for its people? How should we solve this matter that their EPF, I mean, I'm just asking because you're from the bank and all that. How do we solve this matter?
Let me just answer it in a different way. Norwegian has a similar fund like sovereign
MDB.
fund.
Yeah. They're all millionaires now. Yeah.
Norwegian, I mean, they're the biggest sovereign fund in the world. And they have enough funds to take care of the whole welfare of the whole country. So because they're safe, the country is safe. The country, there's no leakages. They're safe. I mean, it's the biggest fund in the world. But if you visit their fund, it's only a 10-story building, I think. So there's no wastage. But Petronas is a well-run organization, deservedly top in the 500 fortune. But the government is tapping on those funds, not necessarily for the welfare of the people, but for. So
I have to ask you this question, Dato, since you brought that up. So if that's the case, then do you think that the upcoming implementation of things like Kota Madani and all this are putting us on the right track in terms of the welfare of the people? Do we need projects like that? Instead, we should focus on these issues, because when you have a group of people who have no money to sustain themselves, I mean, the economic backlash is just, I don't even want to imagine. But do you think we should be more focused on the people issues as opposed to developing new cities, new tall skyscrapers and all that?
3 of the top 10 tallest skyscrapers in our country, within about 2 kilometers of each other. We definitely do not need more.
But let's look at the last 3 alphabets in the acronym MADANI, A, N, and I, which stand for respect, trust, and compassion. So this, I feel, in this past few months, maybe 6 months, has been undermined severely. Whoever the fault is, I don't know. I don't want to point fingers, but it has been undermined by what we see on the news and all that. So in a global survey, found that Malaysia is the second most racist country in the world. We lag behind South Africa, who are number 1, but we are ahead of Guatemala, who is in 3rd spot.
In terms of?
Racism. This was an index done, a survey done where the people of the nations were asked certain questions, and based on their answers, this is the result. Now, whatever I'm just putting some perspective to this question, but regardless of which, we can see that the issues that are grabbing mainstream now are very racially based, which I don't like. I've never liked it because it's not good for the country long term. For my children, it's not good for them. How do we better the respect, trust, and compassion part of Madani in Malaysia in the coming years?
If you recall, the secondary part of my title of the book is what can we learn from them? So we have made a commitment to unity, satu bangsa, since 1957. That's almost 70 years ago, 68 years ago. And what we got to ask ourselves is, what have we actually done to achieve that? Most of our policies are, tangent to it, are polarizing instead of bringing us together. Schools, many Chinese and many Malays grow up their whole life without ever mixing with others, except, when you go to a shop to buy a product. But in terms of having friends, very few, because we go to different schools. We work with government, many Malays work with government, entirely Malay environment. Chinese work with the other Chinese companies. So there's no. So we got to ask ourselves, actually, because we clearly have not achieved that which we expressed 3 times. First when Merdeka, then when we formulated Rukun Negara after May 13, and again when Mahathir came up with Vision 2020,
Bangsa Malaysia.
where he said the first challenge is to form a Bangsa Malaysia. And again, Madani. So, but the question is, but Madani is too early to put misjudgment. Despite 50 explaining this vision over, we haven't done anything substantive to achieve that.
Okay.
The key thing, the very first thing that should be done is stop having race-based parties. Race-based parties perpetuate racism. Because if you are race-based parties, the only way you can come up through the party rank is to play the race card. So how can you promote? Who is going to promote the unity? As long as you have race-based parties. This is why the second chapter of my book was about Dato On Jaafar, because he wanted to open up Malays to non-Malays.
Yeah.
And your response to me was, but if you do that, there's no more UMNO. Yes, no, there is UMNO, but UMNO is United Malayan National Party, not United Malay National Party. If we had done that, there was no need for MCA, no need for MIC. We would have started to implement Bangsa Malaya then, Bangsa Malaya. So,
but when in your title of the book, just in closing, you talk about how the title is How We Miss These Chances. And you did quote, when in that chapter, you talk about how that was a missed chance at nation building. So at this point in time, looking ahead, or do you think that the cat's out of the bag already and there's no way to reach that unity that perhaps Dato On had visioned now? That we will forever be a multi-racial country where people live in their own communities together, as opposed to living under one banner, which is the flag.
It's a harder goal to achieve then than now. But if you still have the same aspiration for the country, for Bangsa, and nothing less is sustainable. If we continue this way, it's not sustainable. So if we have towards that, it may take longer. It's going to be harder, but this is where affirmative action is required. That's why I said affirmative action of a different kind may be required.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dato, for coming on the podcast again.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you on. You're always welcome. It's always a seat for you. Yeah.
But you ambushed me this time. you never gave me notice of all these questions.
But you had fun. Come on, Dato. You enjoyed it. It was fun. So, guys, that was Dato Mohammed Hussein. Of course, always a pleasure having him on. Please share your thoughts and comments. And as always, we'll be back again soon. So, guys, and don't forget to get his book, How Malaysia Missed 7 Chances at Nation Buildings. Link will be in the description. But get your copy now. Take care, guys. We'll see you. Bye.